Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. Welcome
Hi.
Hi, Fabio. Welcome to a new edition of the Future Food Series by ProVeg Incubator and Zintinus. I am Albrecht Wolfmeyer, head of the ProVeg Incubator, and my co-host is again Fabio Simpson, partner at Zintinus. Hi, Fabio.
Hi, Albrecht. Great to see you again. Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you all on board. We had this time again over 200 applications for our 7th version of the Future Food Series, and it's so great to have also such a beautiful panel here with us today, experienced and all expert in this field of precision fermentation. And we are discussing today all the potential that we see in the field of precision fermentation. My name is Fabio Simpson, and I'm partner at Zintinus and also the president of the German Association for Alternative Protein. And we're looking forward to have a wonderful 1.5 hour here together with all of you.
Thank you. Yeah, I can't wait to start talking with our fantastic panel. And for everyone else, if you want to join the discussion for questions and comments on the topics, on what's said, and to the panel here, use the Q&A button, please. And if you want to share whatever contact details or just chat, use the chat for that. And if you want to share, of course, your thoughts and the experience here on social media, LinkedIn, and so on, you can also do that and use the hashtag Future Food Series and also Food Tech for that. Yeah. So Fabio, what's up at Zintinus, by the way?
Thanks for asking. Yeah, at Zintinus, so Zintinus, for all of you who don't know Zintinus is a growth fund in Europe. We are looking into investments in the growth stage, so that means Series A and B in the field of alternative proteins, functional food, clean nutrition, and also food waste and food loss reduction. And of course, there's a lot of stuff happening in this field. I mean, 2021 was really I would say already a wonderful year for the sector of alternative proteins if we look at the latest numbers of GFI. But I must say 2022 and also already a great start when it comes to the development in the food sector. But let's see how the latest events, how they have an impact on this field. I mean, we are all thinking about it every day, what kind of impact it will have not only on the people, but also on the food system. And we need to see how we are reacting on that. But it's so good to see that the field in general gets a bit mature. We see a lot of technological developments which are now just about to enter into the market. And this is also, of course, happening in the field of precision fermentation. And yeah, and it's also great to have such an day-by-day exchange with you, Albrecht, from ProVeg, and I'm curious to hear what happened on your side.
Yeah, thanks. Just to give some background here, ProVeg International is a food awareness organization, so we are tackling the question of how to take animals out of the food equation from many different angles, and one of it is working with corporations, doing events, working with food service, but also with a lot of startups, early stage startups. That's what we do at the ProVeg Incubator, and we also invest in startups from our cohort and also outside of our cohorts. We run this biannual program that startups can apply to from all over the world. So it's really a very international, a global program. And I'm also really happy to see from the chat here that it's again a very international audience. So we have all these people from India, if time zones allow, also from other continents, from the US, and a lot from many different European countries. And also for our startups, we have supported startups from South America, from North America, from Asia, and of course from many different countries in Europe. So ProVeg is a mission that can be wrapped up by the slogan of 50 by 40. So we want to reduce animal consumption by 50% by the year 2040, and for that we also want to have an impact on early stage innovation. That's where it starts with startups. And we have invested in a couple of impactful companies this year. So stay tuned for some updates on this very soon on our social media channels and newsletter. Our upcoming cohort, actually, the first one this year, will just kick off next week. So you'll get to know a couple of new startups then. So stay tuned for that as well. And another thing is that ProVeg International just launched is the new Food Hub. That's an online platform that you can use to find market data, case studies, all kinds of professional recommendations and so on in one platform, easy to use place as we put it. So check it out on proveg.com. So yeah, now to tonight's discussion. Let's get to know our panelists, Fabio.
Yeah, that would be great. Our first panelist is Jeremy. We had him already in our fermentation session last year in September, but in a different role. Maybe, Jeremy, you can give us a short or an update about what you are doing now and how your role has changed.
Sure, yeah, thank you, Fabio. My name is Jeremy Chignell. I am a senior fermentation scientist working at a company called BioCat Microbials. Prior to that, as Fabio mentioned, I was at Good Food Institute. I was their fermentation scientist there. And then prior to that, I had positions at Cargill and DuPont as a fermentation scientist. So I after a great experience at GFI, so many fantastic people there, I think I was inspired by many of my conversations to re-enter industry. I think I was missing sort of a hands-on science role and a role as a fermentation sort of practicing fermentation scientist. So I decided to re-enter the field. I'm working now for a small sort of a family-owned company in Minnesota as a fermentation scientist. So I'm very happy to be here, happy to meet the other wonderful panel members and continue the conversation.
Great, thank you very much, Jeremy. So I think this is already a great start. When we're talking about your position at the GFI last year, you gave us a short update on your perspective on the field. Has something changed since then? How do you describe it? What is your perspective 6 months or after we talked the last time about the topic?
No, I wouldn't say things have changed. I think the field is dynamic. It's growing as we know. I mean, fermentation is an ancient technology, as we know. Precision fermentation is, at least in terms of science, it's ancient in the sense of synthetic biology has been around now for half a century. So the concept of engineering organisms and then growing them up in big tanks in order to produce a product, which is sort of what precision fermentation is in a nutshell. I mean, that concept has been around for decades. So even though it's a well-established technology, now with, I think, renewed interest in bioproducts in general, and sort of coming on the tail end of the interest in all the research that was done on biofuels a decade, 15 years ago, I think that now the attention has sort of shifted and the energy has really shifted into the bioproduct space, so replacements for petroleum products, and also into the fermentation for food space. So from my perspective, I actually think that things are moving so quickly that I wanted to sort of re-engage with industry and try to get back in the swing of, try to get on the front line of where things are going from a scientific perspective. But I do think that maybe there's been a little bit more of self-reflection about the feasibility of sort of all the targets. I don't want to jump too far ahead. Tell me, let me know if you're planning to talk about this later. But from my perspective at GFI and then back in industry too, I do feel like there's been a little bit of maybe a reckoning from the sense of a sort of a feasibility, certainly from the perspective of, is there the kind of fermentation capacity in the world to be able to make the products that we would like to make? And so there are certainly constraints to be, that I think the field is running up against that maybe are not always taken into account, that now are starting to be recognized as real constraints on a potentially, transformative industry. So
So here you see the biggest obstacle when it comes to scaling up production and also providing the products to the market.
Yeah, the biggest, I mean, I think the biggest constraints right now, as far as turning this from, you know, a lot of very energetic startups, you know, doing brilliant work at smaller scales, turning that into an industry at scale, I think the challenges really are, you know, to put it bluntly, to like tank space in the world. You know, where are we going to grow these organisms? How are we going to make enough, you know, ovomucoid egg protein or you know, casein or whey protein? Where are we going to make this essentially at the kind of scale that we're talking about from a bulk protein, food protein perspective? We're competing with commoditized proteins, you know, in the animal industry, talking about, you know, proteins that are sold or that are made for, you know, next to nothing and sold at tiny margins. And so how do we plan to compete with that model in the long term, you know, given the constraint of fermentation volume that we have right now in the world? You know, most of it is owned by the big players, Cargill, DuPont, you know, these sort of massive companies, DSM. So if they don't want to make alternative proteins, where are we going to make it? So I guess that's sort of, I think that's one of the biggest constraints and the biggest you know, hurdles that the industry has to face. But now we're right in the weeds. So I don't want to take up too much space or time, rather.
Well, that's actually really at the core of the whole discussion, and you know, it's a deal breaker, or if this is the game changer that we all want to see for the industry in a transformative way and not just on a small scale way. That's really a big topic. Another constraint, I would say it is a constraint, right, is regulation. It's getting approval for those products if you can bring them to the market. And so let's talk to Hannah. Let's get to know Hannah Lester. She can give two perspectives: a startup perspective here from Gourmet, from the French startup, but also as a consultant. Hannah, please.
Brilliant, thank you very much. So I'm super excited to be here today. I'm Hannah Lester. I have the amazing role of having two hats. So I am the head of regulatory affairs at Gourmet. So Gourmet is a cell cultured company. So we're creating cell cultured foie gras. So I'm helping them to get through all the regulatory hurdles that come with cell cultured meat. And then my other hat is the head of regulatory. I am the head of regulatory and I'm the principal consultant at Amgen Regulatory Consulting. So my background, I have a huge amount of experience in regulatory affairs. Prior to setting up Amgen, I worked at Penn&Tech Consulting, which is a large regulatory consulting company based in Barcelona. And within that role, I was helping companies to register animal feed additives, novel foods, and different regulated products. But I was becoming more and more uncomfortable working on the feed additive side because we were having to do a lot of animal studies to support the registrations in the EU and other countries. So that's why I really decided to strike out on my own and set up Amgen Regulatory Consulting, which is solely focused on alternative proteins and alternative fats. So my job is to help my clients to navigate all of the complex regulatory requirements in order to demonstrate that their products are safe to enter the food chain.
Thanks a lot. So yeah, this is also like we're in the middle of something big here, and apparently a company like Gourmet, they need someone like you in a very senior role, and all the other companies need a consulting firm like yours because there's so much to be consulted about, right? So what do you see? How do you see the market when it comes to precision fermentation? How much of your work as a consultant is related to comes from that side?
So about 50% of the work that I'm doing for Amgen Regulatory Consulting is for precision-based fermentation companies. I think particularly in EU, we have a very big challenge in terms of the regulatory framework over here. I also help clients over in the US and Singapore and other sort of major markets where things are a little bit more easy, let's say, and a little more clear. Obviously, over in the US, we've already seen 4 products receive GRAS no questions letters from the FDA for several fermentation derived products. So they are really sort of streaking ahead and by far the leaders in terms of regulations for precision fermentation.
Thanks. So then, yeah, Fabio, let's move on to Eva.
Hey, one last question I have to Hannah, to be honest. Foie gras is such a specific application. Maybe you can a bit elaborate on that, so that we are already in the foie gras business before having solved the general meat topic.
Yeah, so sort of Gourmet's mission is to produce foie gras that cuts out the animal, basically, because of all of the meat products that you can get on the market. Foie gras is the most cruel, I would say, because of the force feeding that happens. And actually, we've seen foie gras banned in about 18 countries worldwide. So that's either ban on the importation of foie gras or ban on the production of foie gras. So it's an amazing product, and a lot of people around the world enjoy foie gras very, very much. But the way that it's produced is just unacceptable. So this is why Gourmet is focusing on foie gras.
That's the fun thing, that it's banned, but you can still, the production is banned in many countries, but you can still buy and consume it. So it's a bit of a, yeah, hypocritical situation there anyway, but just a spotlight on cruelty. But Gourmet is also working on other products in the pipeline, so you'll have more than just the foie gras, right?
At the moment, we're just focusing on the foie gras.
Okay, cool. So then, yeah, on to Eva.
Yeah, we are now coming to Eva, and I would say Eva is really a pioneer in this field. And in her former, I got to know her in her former role as the founder of Piece of Meat, and now I'm more than happy to have you here, also in your new role. So maybe you can tell us a bit more. What is Fermify and what are you doing? And yeah, at the moment.
Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks for inviting me. I'm Eva, and I have a background in biotech and food science. And after not completing university, I started to work for cultured meat startups. They were one of the first 3 or 5 in the space. It was Supermeat by then, the Israeli-based company. And yeah, 1 year later, after working for 1 year for Supermeat, I found my own company, Piece of Meat. I was the scientific co-founder, and we really focused also on foie gras, but in particular on cultured fat. And during this time, the market was really growing intensely. So when we found Piece of Meat, it was still a very small sector, but 1 year later, it was like immense, and more than 100 companies worked in this sector. Very highly interested sector, but I decided that I want to stay in independent experts because there were very little experts who could help investors and CPGs, global food companies, and also early stage startups to find the right strategy for cultured meat. So I really saw myself having a greater impact there. And this is why I decided to go to an even more exciting topic for me, precision fermentation, also because my background was more aligned with bacterial fermentation than cell culture. And I met one of my co-founders again in Vienna. He was my professor by then, and like many years ago. And we started together Fermify, and we really focus on a fully digitized production platform for casein proteins. And so we don't want to sell cheese in the end, but really the platform itself. And the platform should be as simple as that every single technician can use our fermenters to produce caseins in-house. So we really want to bring fermenters into house of cheese producers, CPGs, maybe even governments. So everyone should be able to produce caseins themselves, because this is how we see the sector growing and really shift from cows to precision fermentation.
So when you are talking about a platform, are you talking about also a physical platform because of the scarcity in the fermenter sector?
Yes, exactly. So we built a fully digitized bioreactor. We also developed the microbial strains. So we programmed the bacteria, we optimized them to grow in around 2,000 liter bioreactors continuously. And we work on the software that no human input is required in most of the cases. And we want to put those bioreactors into our customers' facility, and we provide them with media and the strains and the software that they don't have to think about anything. So it should be very simple to be used.
Wow, amazing. It sounds really like a full stack approach for everybody in the sector, and the right answer to Jeremy's constraints or named constraints in the sector. Since your co-founder is professor in Vienna, do you see that we also see a bigger movement in the science transition here, that more and more people, especially in Europe, are now starting their business coming out of university and starting in the sector? Because something what we have seen in the past was Europe really pretty much lacking in.
Yeah, so I saw a huge enhancement in advancing of the precision fermentation space, and also in bioprocess engineering, but all the new technologies are not really used in the pharmaceutical industry because it's really strictly regulated, like having fully digitized bioreactors and also have like continuously processes. It's not used right now in those industries because they're super slow in adapting, but right now we really have the chance to build up a completely new sector and make everything right from the very beginning. I think that's very important, to have efficient processes in the end. That are cost efficient for sure, because in the end we want to be cheaper than the cow.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I see also a pattern there that you are more focusing on the B2B sector or the B2B side on the solutions, not on the B2C side, as a lot of other brands are looking at.
Absolutely. I don't see myself being the best provider for cheese products. I also don't have the distribution chain. I see that CPGs have that. They also can produce it in-house. So they also have experts and the facilities to run bioprocesses. And if they decide, okay, they want to have a product, like they want to use precision fermentation based cheeses, they can make this decision and produce it in large scale. I wouldn't be able to produce it in large scale. And we have also learned it from several plant-based companies. They could be somewhat bigger and their products could be everywhere, but they're limited because they're not able to build facilities as fast as they would need to. But if CPGs and cheese producers really go on board, they could do it decentralized. I really believe that that makes sense.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Eva. Before we go on and introduce, or let our next panelist introduce himself, just a quick reminder for all of you who came a bit later, please use the Q&A function, which we have here in our menu, so that you can ask some questions. Right after our short introduction round, we will ask all the questions that you mentioned. So thank you.
Right, yeah, so don't be shy, use it, and we'll try to answer all of those, and if we can't, we'll try to answer them afterwards. Yeah, onto Ahmed Khan, the founder and editor of Cell Agri, and also a consultant in the Cell Ag space. Yeah, when it comes to the future of food, you've been very active there and really building a unique platform there. And you know all the companies, the startups and the more advanced companies in the space, Ahmed. So very happy to have you. If you tell us a bit more about your role, how you got into this, and why you're so excited about it, and especially about precision fermentation, that would be.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Albrecht. Thank you for the invitation to be part of this panel session. It's great to be here with everyone. My name is Ahmed Khan, and I'm the founder and editor of Cell Agri. We are a news and market insights platform that focuses on the future of food with cellular agriculture. And at Cell Agri, we define cellular agriculture into two main buckets: the cell-based products like the meats, as well as acellular agriculture using cell cultures to produce an animal protein product, which is otherwise known as precision fermentation. So that's how we also cover precision fermentation as well. Cell Agri was founded back in 2017. My background is in cell biology, and I was blown away by the whole idea of using cell cultures to produce food. And since then, Cell Agri has become one of the main news and insights platforms focusing on this field. While we do focus on the future of food side of cellular agriculture, we do track the wider ecosystem as well, including textiles and biomaterials and other applications of essentially how cell culture technology can become the future of biomanufacturing. And we also have an overview gaze as well on the wider alternative protein ecosystem as well. Back in 2020, we actually revamped the Cell Agri website to become more of a homepage now for the wider cell agriculture field, where anyone can come to learn anything and everything about cell agriculture, what it is, how it works, how can I get involved, and a range of other resources as well, such as the first ebook published about the cell agriculture field, a 5-day primer course for those who found the ebook too long, and the first jobs board dedicated to the cell agriculture field, as well as a range of virtual events as well, helping raise awareness of what's going on in this ecosystem. Like you said, Albrecht, I also do some consulting work with different firms looking to learn more about this field. To that end, we're also tracking the investment landscape around the cell agriculture field as well to help everyone keep up to date with how fast this field is actually really growing. And yeah, this is in particular the acellular agriculture precision fermentation side has been growing rapidly over the years. So we're excited to be part of this panel session with everyone and looking forward to the discussions.
Thanks. Yeah, you've been working with this and looking into this, exploring this field for a couple of years in a very nascent space overall, alternative protein, and a very nascent industry of companies there now. As Eva said, I think we're at about 100 cell ag companies or so, maybe a new one on a almost daily basis now. So, what do you think? If you can wrap this up in a way, like where are we at the moment in terms of maturity? Yeah, if you can sort of give it a shot at that question.
Yeah, sure. I guess the best context to how to describe that is, while the cell cultured meat side has gotten a lot of media attention for the last 3-4 years now, the reality is the precision fermentation side is where the field has really been making a lot of progress very early on. If we think about it like this, in 2019, the investment landscape for this field, only less than 20% of investments were actually in the cell cultured meat side. The majority of it was in the precision fermentation side, because that's where everyone saw the earlier opportunities, because the relatively less hurdles for that field to come to market. And now we're seeing that in the US. We have a few cell cultured products via precision fermentation in the market. So it's really exciting to see how that field is maturing now and what that could mean for newer companies looking to do precision fermentation and the path they follow, and also lessons that the cell cultured meat companies can also learn, and how to approach regulation and how to approach coming to market as well in the future.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, there's a lot of these big topics to talk about. The one is regulation, one is scaling, and the actual technical challenge here, and the costs of it, the investment part. And someone mentioned it already in the chat as well, or in the with the question. Of course, it's about consumer acceptance. So this is also, these are like the main pillars, I think, here. So let's try to tackle those big ones a bit more, and see if we can find out more about the challenges and how we can overcome them. Starting again with Jeremy, the topic that you mentioned in the beginning, and you started already going into detail about is about the costs and the scale up. Where do you think we are, and how can it be solved? It has been a big debate last year with GFI and others in the space. Some people say it's not possible at all, and it's just going nowhere. What is your take on this? Of course, a different one, I take it.
Yeah, I don't think it's I certainly am not pessimistic about it. I just think that, it's like any other major change. It's going to require some will and some government involvement and significant investor commitment. I think and I am not, I don't come from a business background, but my impression is that much of the sort of investment in biotech is often with a focus on sort of capital light, IP related sort of, investment. So a lot of the funding rounds that we see are largely sort of focused on that sort of stage of a new business. I believe, and I'm speaking a little bit out of ignorance here, but I believe, I mean, it makes sense that investors would be a little bit wary about investing in, you know, new facilities, new buildings, that sort of thing. But honestly, at this point, you know, what the field needs and what, you know, the alternative protein sort of field in general needs is not, you know, not necessarily, I mean, we always need more innovation, but we're at a point where we have approaches, we have, you know, brilliant people doing brilliant things with alt proteins. It's the scale up that is really the bottleneck here, and it's the capacity. And so I do see some early signs that there's a change among investors starting to talk about, you know, we need to start investing in steel in the ground again. You know, we need investors, you know, larger investment firms, especially with sort of institutional type investors, are getting more interested in investing in that sort of thing because they see this, you know, as relatively low risk. It's not just, you know, the alternative protein movement. It's a very hot topic, hot field right now, but fermentation is not a new technology, as I mentioned before. So it's relatively low risk to be investing in, you know, a functioning sort of food grade fermentation facility, from the perspective of you know, all the other things that you could invest in terms of infrastructure. But so mature technology, new applications, bright future. I do think that you know, there's more and more interest, especially starting this year, that I've seen in actual infrastructure investment. People are starting to see that as the real bottleneck. The message is starting to get through, I think. And so so I think we're going to start to see that as sort of the next round of interest as far as funding goes. We always need more innovation, and we always need more, you know, sort of interesting applications. Certainly there are so many companies out there that are doing amazing things from a scientific perspective. But I do think that, you know, at a certain point, the industry is going to ask itself, can this make money? You know, can this gain acceptance? Can it become ubiquitous enough that consumers get over some of the hesitations that they might have? And the only way to do that is to scale it up and make it at a level where it's comparable in cost to the existing technologies, animal-based proteins.
So Jeremy, do you think that we need more shortcut innovations in this field, since the big capacities are at Cargill and all the big companies? So is it more about having the right solutions in place to help to allocate certain capacities, or that we have, yeah, let's say, in between solutions which fit into the big existing infrastructures?
I think that's right. You know, to be fair to the DuPonts and the Cargills of the world, and those are just two examples, but there are many, you know, they are at the forefront of alternative proteins. They want to be involved. They see the market where it's heading. They want to be at the, you know, part of that. So it's not that they're resisting. I think I said something about that earlier, like, what if they were to decide they don't want to be? The fact is they really do want to be, but fermentation can do more than just make food products. It can, you know, a lot of the capacity is spoken for, like for pharmaceuticals, not for those companies, but for, you know, other food products, other sort of bio commodities. I'm thinking in terms of, for example, one example for Cargill is lactic acid. So they make a huge amount of lactic acid using a proprietary engineered yeast strain. So that's not a food ingredient. It's a sort of an industrial biochemical. Are they interested in converting their huge capacity for lactic acid, where they make a lot of money, over to make you know, proteins for food consumption? That it's not even clear if you can do that conversion to food consumption, or to food materials. But you know, so that's, these large companies do want to be involved. They do want to be in the business of making proteins, you know, and being on the forefront of that, of the coming sort of demand. On the other hand, it's just the feasibility and the regulation is a real challenge. So I do think that, you know, in that middle space between the startup making it in a lab in Silicon Valley or in, you know, whatever tech hub, and, you know, DuPont making it, or Cargill making it at 300,000 liters, you know, there's certainly a lot of space in between. And so that may be a sweet spot for companies that are looking to scale up, because the investment is not prohibitive, you know, to be able to make investments in a facility like that, sort of a mid-range facility, 10 to, you know, $30 million, something like that will get you a good facility, good volumetric productivity of your product, enough certainly to demonstrate that you can make it, that you can scale up. And then when some larger capacity at the commercial, you know, huge scale does become available, then you'll be ready to go and you'll have your process in place. So yes, the short answer, that's a long answer to your question, which is yes, I do think there's a lot of opportunity in that middle scale, sort of taking things from the early stage / pilot to the huge commercial scale. I mean, nobody wants to say, well, I made it in my, you know, 100-liter pilot scale or 1,000-liter pilot scale, so I'm ready to go to 300,000 liters. Like, that's not a rational approach, and I think that people will, you know, find that would be a hard lesson to learn for any company. So yeah, there's a lot of space in between that can make marketable product and also execute on the scale up.
Ahmed, you are tracking, of course, the investment activity in the space. So what have you been seeing over the years? We've seen a lot of money going into the cell ag space, and a lot of it in some companies, in like hundreds of millions actually, in companies like Perfect Day and the Every company. But overall, how is the situation there for precision fermentation, and is it enough? How much is needed actually to get to such a point that Jeremy just described?
That's the billion-dollar question, isn't it? How much will actually be enough there? Jeremy raised some really great points about how this field is still relatively brand new. We're still looking to ask many of these questions about, can we scale production? What will we need for economic viability and commercial viability there? It's a lot of interesting questions going around, and lots of startups around the world are actually raising major funding rounds in the precision fermentation space in particular to help them move to that next level of pilot scale or even beyond to explore that commercial viability. On the Cell Agri investment database, we actually looked it up just before this webinar. Looking at dairy specifically, precision fermentation in startups have raised over $1 billion. That's phenomenal. In a wider cell agriculture food ecosystem that has raised $3 billion, 1/3 of that is just on precision fermentation dairy, not other forms of dairy as well. So it shows how companies are at the point now where they're raising these large funding rounds because they have shown that they can do the lab bench, the small scale, now moving up to larger commercial production to come to market as well, like we're seeing in the US right now. On the idea of maturity of the space right now, one opportunity that startups and companies in the space are exploring is forming partnerships with some of the companies that Jeremy mentioned, the likes of those types of companies, to help them accelerate scaling and come to market faster. You mentioned Perfect Day earlier. In 2018, they were one of the first companies to form a partnership with a company that has fermentation at scale, ADM in the US. After forming the initial partnership, they were then the first cell agriculture, precision fermentation startup to launch a dairy ice cream, limited in 2019, and then through more partnerships in 2020, 2021, and even earlier this week, they announced a new partnership product. So that one example, the Every company, formerly Clara Foods, very similar model. They formed a partnership with Ingredion, and the last 12 months, they launched 3 new products, looking at either an end food product or food processing enzyme to highlight the different applications along the way. So lots is happening over there. It's quite interesting to see how the investment landscape is reflecting how this field is accelerating as well.
Can you put it in numbers? Do you have some insights that you want to share about the investment landscape?
So at Cell Agri, having tracked the wider cellular agriculture food landscape, as of end of December 2021, over $3 billion has now been invested in the cellular agriculture food ecosystem. Of that, 1.6 billion have gone towards acellular or precision fermentation startups. That's the majority of the funding, despite having in the bigger picture less media attention than the meat side. That's where the majority of funding has gone to, likely because investors have lower perceived risk of that side due to lower regulatory barriers, as well as more commercialization opportunities. And within that 1.6 billion, as I mentioned earlier, about over 1 billion has gone towards the precision fermentation dairy application.
Thanks.
Thank you very much, Ahmed. Coming more from a market perspective, so I mean, from the consumer perspective, we have seen also the latest numbers by GFI that the growth in plant-based dairy is growing steady, but it has a bit slowed down now. Do you think that we are challenging now the gap between the early adopters and the mass market? And the big question to all of you, maybe you have also observed it, is how we can overcome this gap between the early adopter market, where everybody is very eager to find new solutions and try new products, but also we need to reach the mass market to really have a big impact. So
I'm sure the other panelists can have a more insightful answer than this, but in terms of precision fermentation dairy in general, that's the big opportunity right there. I think the number came out in the GFI report last year that plant-based dairy sales in the US was over $2.5 billion. If precision fermentation dairy companies can capture the same sustainability messages about how this product is, not just how the product is made, but why companies are doing this, and offer a product that is more functionally like conventional animal dairy and tastes more animal conventional dairy, it's a huge market opportunity right there for them, not just for the early adopter, but it can capture the B2B side for functionality of the proteins. Yeah, you can reach the mass market right there.
Yeah, because you are able to produce the same applications you would do with milk and with normal dairy products, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Very, very great. So, should we now jump into the Q&As? Yeah.
I mean, we're in the middle of it. Speaking of consumers, I think this is something that came up in the chat as well, and it's the question that is often asked, is about the acceptance. It's right that someone said there, the plant-based market, the plant-based dairy alternatives market is so huge and it's so mature. It's the most mature category there, of course. It's become staple food. But there's a gap still, especially when it comes to other dairy products like the cheese category, that can be bridged and that can be finally filled by the precision fermentation derived products, right? That's the big promise that we hear a lot and that we're all excited about. Then there's the consumer acceptance question from the market side. I mean, I don't know who wants to go first. I think this is for all of you. Where we are there, and if there is a real issue, an emotional one, and also more of a technical one. Maybe that's for Hannah first.
So, I mean, I think it was Formo that did a market research survey recently. They're obviously a precision-based fermentation company working on producing precision-based cheese. And from their survey, it seemed that the biggest issue to consumer acceptance was safety. So they're looking to the regulatory authorities to rubber stamp these products and say they're safe. And if the regulatory authorities say they're safe, then consumers are more likely to try these products. That was a small sample size, so it's not necessarily representative, but it was just an interesting insight, I thought.
Yeah, true. I mean, yeah, what do you think personally, all of you? How ready is the market? How ready are consumers for that kind of? I mean, we have some examples like the Brave Robot ice cream in the US, and now dairy companies, macaron. I know I haven't tried them, but I'm excited about that. But these are like, you know, small numbers and niche products rather. But it's just a start, right?
Yeah, I would like to share what I have observed within the last year. So I'm vegan myself since 18 years. And in the beginning, it was really difficult to get even soy milk in supermarkets. And they were also not good. But right now, they are getting better and better. So people, the perception for plant-based and nut milk is really high. And when you stand in row at Starbucks, then everyone is choosing plant-based milk. So I think there we already reached a point where no further improvement is really required because people already love it. It's a bit different for cheese because vegan cheese is not good at all. It's most of the time a clump of fat and starch, and people don't like it because it's just not there yet. So what I have perceived within the last 2-3 years is that people are really open for precision fermentation derived proteins for cheese, just because there is no alternative for it. People want to be plant-based, but they don't want to sacrifice for cheese. So I really see a very high perception rate for cheese products that come from precision fermentation. And when it comes to bacterial or yeast cultures, I think people do not really care that much about it as long as it's clean and it's not hazardous for the health. So there is no health factor that's not unhealthy. So I think people are really ready for the product and many of them are waiting for it. So I looked myself at different people, different generations, young people, old people, but also from different geographical locations, and all of them are really open for that, and they are like, really, it really blows their mind that we can produce it without the cow.
So cheese is really the big challenge, I would say, and mozzarella or pizza cheese, I would say, is a holy grail in the sector. So if you know, and this goes also to our audience, if you know good solutions, then please feel free also to post them in our chat. I'm always curious to see the latest versions in the sector, and yeah. And maybe Eva, you can give us also an insight. What is where you see the best solution so far in the sector that has really this creaminess and maybe the almost the right characteristics here?
The question was for me?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So the advantage of caseins, which are cheese proteins, is that they have the same functionality as cow proteins. Like they are the same proteins and they have the same functionality, like the typical melting point, the typical stretchiness. You can all find it in precision fermentation derived cheese proteins. So the proteins themselves will be basically the same. How we come there, it might be a bit different. We also need to check if we need mice cells, for example, how far we need to advance building and putting together those proteins. That need to be studied because that's not clear yet. We also don't know if we need all the 4 proteins or maybe only a part of it to build this 3D network of cheese. So these are things that need to be studied, because when you start with milk from cows, then you need to work with whatever they give you. But right now we have so much freedom to play with science because we can grow them separately, the caseins, put them together, check how they interact with plant-based fats, for example, or maybe even fermentation derived fats. This is like a whole new sector, and there are a lot of questions need to be answered. So we are just in the very beginning, and as Jeremy told us, fermentation is not a new technology. Also, programming microbes is also not new. So this technology already exists. But when it comes to product design, there are some unknown factors which we need to study. And I really hope that also academia will join that to study that really molecular basis and do the analytics for it to compare it. And I also bring in AI, for example, to study molecules and how they interact with fat, for example, and how different caseins interact. I think that's really important to gain as much information as possible, also to be able to communicate that with the consumers, that it's really clear what they will have on the table.
Yeah, there was a question now to you, which is, does cheese require chemosin?
Yes and no. So I would say yes, because when you start your cheese, so normally you start with dairy and then you start to participate the casein and separate it from the whey and the starter cultures and enzymes you still need for sure. So it's basically the same way how to produce cheese, just the input in the beginning is different.
Yeah. And also a question to all of you, which I've seen now, is can you elaborate more on the nutritional aspects and the health aspects of precision fermentation? So are there any risks or other big challenges which still need to be solved? So maybe you can give us here some insights. Jeremy?
Well, I'm not. Yeah, I can talk to that a little bit, I guess. I mean, precision fermentation is what you want it to be. If you want to make, if you want to just make fat by your precision fermentation and eat that, well, then that's not very healthy for you. But if you want to make, whatever you want to make, you can make it. So it's really up to the design of the food. So I don't think there's anything per se about precision fermentation that speaks to the health of the food or the protein target, other than the GMO question. And I think that's the elephant in the room in some sense. You have a certain series of organisms. If you're talking about making casein or making ovomucoid or something like that, you have a certain sort of array of organisms. Pichia pastoris is sort of the classic one that can do this at scale, and you are going to have to engineer it, because it doesn't make none of these organisms make these proteins themselves. There are a few with regard to fats. That's a little bit of a different story, because there are some yeasts out there that naturally accumulate certain types of fats. There's a lot of work, actually. GFI was in the process of doing some calls for proposals on fats via fermentation. So this is there's a company, a new startup in Europe called Cultivated Biosciences that is working on this topic, sort of hyper fat accumulating yeasts that then have certain properties that are similar to animal fats. So there are some cases where you can make a precision fermentation product that is not, where you're not making, you're not using an engineered organism. But in general, especially if you're going to sort of emphasize the precision part of precision fermentation, you're going to be, you're going to be doing some genetic modification. So does that mean that the final product is less healthy? I would argue no, because the final protein product goes through an extensive process of purification and recovery. And there are, by regulation, there's no detectable nucleic acids from the GM organism in the final product. And so in order to sort of, that's part of the process of purifying the protein. And that's sort of standard practice. You want to get rid of GM nucleic acid material. So, even if you're very, very sort of against the concept of genetic modification of organisms for food, which everybody has different opinions. I'm sort of, I get pulled in either direction, frankly. But when it comes to a fermentation process, I don't think the argument is as strong as, say, against genetic modification of crop plants, for example, simply because you're using the organism in a fermentation as a sort of a biocatalyst to make this protein of interest, and then you're separating out the protein of interest. And I think it's a very rich topic that needs to be addressed. I've talked to several, as part of GFI, I talked to several companies that were sort of in the process of trying to figure this out from a precision fermentation perspective, because the regulations, in my opinion, are not clear. So when you make myoglobin, for example, as we know, Motif has just done, that is a bovine protein, right? So you've made this protein. You purify it then from your yeast culture, your fermentation. So then you have myoglobin. Is that a cow protein? Is it a yeast protein? Is it neither? Is it both? How do you classify it? How do you label it? even from an ethical or a an ontological standpoint, what is this thing? Where does it come from? What do we call it? And so I think there's a lot of legal sort of work to be done there to try to define these products. But you ask a vegan, will you eat myoglobin that comes from a fermentation? It's an interesting concept. I mean, if it is technically a bovine protein. So anyway, I think that there's a lot of discussion to be had here, but from the health perspective, it's very much about what you want to make and how you want to combine the ingredients. You can make it as unhealthy as you want. Or as healthy as you want.
I see so many great questions here in the chat, but please use the F&A section, because then we can keep track on all the wonderful questions that you are posting here. We will just take questions from the Q&A section. So please, if you have already posted some questions in the chat, then please copy it again and put in the Q&A section, because then we get a better overview. Thank you very much.
Yeah, also if we need to follow up later on, this will make it easier for us to figure this out. Yeah, I think we moved a little bit from health. It's all connected to health, to regulation, and to the hard facts. And I think, Hannah, you have a lot to say about that. So we would like to know, of course, what would be on the label, but also what is the current situation. Someone was asking about that in the EU. And since you have a global perspective, you can compare this to other markets, to other regions, say Singapore or the US. Where do we stand there?
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, the US is already way ahead in terms of precision fermentation products. So there are already 4 that have received generally recognized as safe, no questions letters from the FDA. And my favorite example of comparing and contrasting the EU with the US is Impossible Foods with their leg hemoglobin. It's over in the US. That was, it's been sold for a very long time now. Just under the generally recognized as safe pathway, whereas over in the EU, they had to submit a genetically modified organism dossier, so a GMO dossier, because their leg hemoglobin contains host proteins in the final product, so it's not absolutely pure. And because of the presence of these host proteins means that it's a GMO in the EU. So it's a category 3 genetically modified microorganism rather than a category 2 genetically modified microorganism. And it's that distinction that takes you from being a novel food into a GMO. And with the Impossible Food dossier that they've submitted in the EU. They submitted it in 2019 to the European Commission and the European Food Safety Authority. It then took around 18 months for the dossier to be validated. It was then immediately clock stopped. So that's when EFSA goes back to the applicant and asks them for more information. And it's still at this clock stop phase right now. It does say on the EFSA website, on their open EFSA, that the clock stop should be finished by the end of this year, and EFSA should publish their opinion by the end of this year. But that's just a guideline, and there's no reason why they wouldn't issue more clock stops within that time frame, and then that whole deadline for them to finish their risk assessment is pushed further and further into the future. So I think Impossible Foods are in a very tricky situation in the EU, and this is a very good sort of example for everyone, just because they have their product in the US. In the EU, we have this tricky situation, and there's no doubt that this product is safe, and that we're able to prove the safety of these precision fermentation products. But then if they fall into the GMO territory, then it's highly political, and you have even more of an issue then when it comes to getting the products approved. So EFSA ticks the box for safety, and then it's the European Commission and the EU member states that then vote to approve the product. And in the EU, basically all of the member states, so the 27 member states, have a say, and they have a vote, and they need so to get a product approved, you need 55% of the member states voting in favor. And of those 55% of member states, they need to represent 65% of the EU population. So if you get France and Germany saying no, then that's really going to mess up your approval. So I think there's a huge amount of work to do in terms of lobbying the European Commission, speaking to member state authorities, trying to educate them, trying to get them on board. And also there's a huge amount of work that the European Commission needs to do as well to update their knowledge about this sort of novel field, which actually isn't that novel at all, because there are many, many examples of products that are derived by precision fermentation, like enzymes, vitamins, amino acids. So it's not really that new to them, but it's the looking at it or using this technology for production of proteins that they seem to be stuck on, and then the classification of whether it's GMO or not.
Hannah, so where do we get the best overview about the lobbying efforts that are underway to tackle this regulatory constraint in the EU? This is also one question that is mentioned here.
Yeah, so there are there's a lot that individual companies can do. So they can speak to their members of European Parliament, they can speak to their local authorities, and then they can use, it's always best to use a company specialized in public affairs that have access to the right people and are able to ask the right questions. So I think it's well worth getting a public affairs consultant involved just to help get in front of the right people. And then obviously there's the individual effort, but then there's the effort as an industry as a whole. So I think there's a huge amount of work that the NGOs and nonprofits can do, and then an awful lot that industry stakeholders groups can do as well.
Yeah. So Ahmed, yeah, okay.
I was just saying GFI and of course ProVeg International are on it here in Europe as well. It's a big task anyway. Yeah, sorry, if you want to elaborate on the EFSA problem or the EFSA setup that is just not made for this, right? So what is the problem? How can it be solved?
So it's not necessarily an EFSA problem necessarily. It's just very tricky. So the guidance on genetically modified microorganisms that they are following was issued in 2011, I think. So it's well overdue a massive update, just because there are the definitions there. So there are the definitions and the different categories and the different levels of purification you need to make sure that your product is a novel food and not a GMO. But it's sort of the gray areas that make it really tricky. So I think they need to update the guidance and issue much clearer guidance, and specifically focus on the complex products that are being produced by precision fermentation, whereby there may be host proteins present in the final product, but there's no recombinant DNA in the final product. So I think that's where there's a little bit of ambiguity there.
Thanks. If I have one follow-up one on that also. I mean, for Eva, maybe it's not a problem because you don't have the end products, but you as a consultant, what do you say to a startup that is in the space? How long will it take? I mean, the Impossible Foods, it's a different ingredient, but the example is not very encouraging. How long does it take you probably to get there, to get approval, if at all, for a precision fermentation cheese company, for example?
So I did an analysis of the time from dossier submission to approval for alternative proteins in the EU and the US. So the average time from the time you submit your dossier through to getting approval from the European Commission is 28 months. And then over in the US, the time from submitting your GRAS notice until the FDA issues the no questions letter is 10 months. So the US have a much clearer framework and a much faster way to get the products approved.
So it's always good to have this, as we've seen with many startups, many companies, they have this flexible strategy that you try EU, US, Singapore, other markets at the same time, and you'll see who's first.
Yeah, no, it's always good to have a global regulatory strategy and sort of run your registrations in parallel, because EU is always going to be the toughest and take the longest. But then you're going to see results or approvals more quickly in Singapore and the US. And the good thing is the data package is pretty much the same for all of the major markets.
Thank you very much, Hannah. I have another question. I think it's to you, Eva, and to you, Jeremy. Are you focused on a specific casein type or all 4 types? It's more, I think, to you, Eva. How difficult will it be to mimic production of casein mycel?
Yeah, so a very interesting question, and we ask ourselves the same question in the very beginning. So yeah, so we really looked on from a biotechnological perspective, what is happening during the cheese production steps, like what do we really need? And for sure, we work on all 4 caseins, all of them are expressed by our system, so that works well. But in the end, we need to figure out, I don't believe that we need micelles, but I would not put my hand in fire for that assumption. Just like we need a 3D network of those proteins, which looks exactly the same as in cheese. And we are working on that. And we also build models on it, how they interact and where we need to go. And if we really need all of the 4 proteins, we cannot answer that yet, but we don't think so. We just look at different proteins and what their what is the job inside the micelle and or the 3D network of cheese, and then go from there, basically.
Okay, thank you very much. I think this was a very good answer to it. So I think that this question is also to you, Ahmed. How will precision fermentation improve plant milks from various plants, oat, pea, soy, other grains, or other legumes?
That's a really interesting idea. One concept of how precision fermentation or just generally cell-cultured food ingredients could have a role in plant-based products is the idea of developing hybrid or blends. If you can match something like plant cell-cultured fats, for example, by precision fermentation and incorporate that into plant-based products, whether that be a plant-based meat, for example, you could potentially improve the consumer experience there, improve the mouthfeel, the texture, help make plant-based products that have a more on par experience with conventional meat products or conventional dairy products, for example. So the idea of developing hybrid blends could be one way to explore that. But that's also raising an interesting question of would consumers want that? It's something that we in the alternative protein space discuss and explore, because when you look at a cell-cultured food company, partnerships is one of the ways they can come to market. Partnerships with other large CPGs or even more established brands in the wider alternative protein ecosystem. Would consumers would consumers who are interested in a plant-based product be open to plant-based hybrid, cell-cultured hybrid? It's something we think consumers might be interested in, but without the right communication about not just how it's done, but the why, it may be a challenge. But definitely, the idea of making hybrids with cell-cultured ingredients, precision fermentation fats, for example, with plant-based, is a big opportunity that, if there's interest, would like to be explored a lot.
Thank you very much, Ahmed. This was very, very helpful. I think this answered a lot of questions, because there was always a question: is it more the taste or the technology? So yeah.
Yeah, these are the tricky ones, right? I mean, depending on connected to the scale problem, the scale-up problem, you will have hybrid products anyway. This goes for cell-based meat as well, necessarily. And for the taste question, those taste questions, I think it's what Jeremy said that wraps it up really nicely. It's that it depends on what you have in mind and what kind of product you want to produce. Because if you just have the caseins, of course, it's not a cheese yet. Someone asked about, can you do like really high quality cheeses? I think, Eva, right? It would be possible. It just depends on your ambition and how you get there and how much it costs as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We just changed the input, like the beginning of the input, like the caseins, but the rest of the process will be the same. Like we have a fat source, we have a carbohydrate source, which won't be lactose, which is very good because there are many people who cannot eat lactose. So I think we even open up a new market, and maybe even the entire cheese market in Asia where people cannot eat lactose. And the other steps of the cheese production should be the same. I think producing cheese is very romantic, very traditional, and this should not be changed. So we really want cheese producers to use the same facilities to produce cheese, just the input in the beginning should be different. So it should be definitely possible to work on all types of cheese that are produced right now. And we are starting collaborations on that as soon as summer. So if there are any cheese producers who would like to collaborate with us, receive proteins, we are very happy to talk to them.
Yeah, this question also came up from someone that if such companies, such startups would be acquired by big cheese companies, maybe yes, but the collaboration is the interesting thing, like what Ahmed mentioned about perfect days early on collaboration with giants in the fermentation space, because that's how you can actually become powerful and impactful yourself, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like whoever wants to have a huge impact. So my goal is to have a huge impact to take cows out. So if this is reached by being acquired by a specific company, if they really can use the technology and decentralize it and produce it globally, I'm open for that for sure. But I would prefer if we open up the space for really everyone, small cheese producers, maybe even farmers who want to take cows out of their stables and put in bioreactors, or whoever want to produce fermenters to produce casein. So we are open to collaborate with everyone, and I would not lock the market too early by being acquired by one and all the others cannot use the technology.
Yeah. Ahmed, anything on the investment activity? Yeah, please.
Yeah, I was just going to add on to the idea of partnerships. It was announced last month in February, actually, that another precision fermentation company that is an interesting situation, Geltor, they use precision fermentation for collagen, which could be used in both cosmetics, beauty, leather, even all the way to gelatin for food products, like collagen for food products, like gelatin. They formed a partnership with a group called Lonza Specialty Ingredients, and last month they announced they finally reached that partnership has taken them to commercial scale of 1 million liters. So this showing almost proof of concept that precision fermentation animal proteins can be scaled up to that level where they could be competitive across different sectors. You asked about the investment landscape. The story does relate to this. One of the reasons why the precision fermentation space has a larger investment landscape compared to cell cultured meats or other cell-based meat products, cell-based agriculture products, is the idea of lower perceived risk from investors for the regulatory hurdles as well as the ability to be commercialized. So as ProVeg Day, the Every Company motif, as well as Geltor has shown, you can use, in the US, the FDA does have a pathway moving forward via the GRAS submission that Hannah spoke about of coming to market in the US. So already there's already a lower regulatory hurdle for that compared to cell-based meat, which is still a big question in places like the US and essentially the whole world outside of Singapore. And the other side of it as well is beyond just food applications. Like Jeremy mentioned, precision fermentation can be used for a wide range of areas. Food is just one area of that. Geltor, on the way to 1 million liter commercial scale, initially launched their collagen proteins in the beauty and cosmetic sector and launched a few different products there, from collagen proteins for the beauty sector all the way to elastin proteins as well, and then ingredient as a service for whatever their clients may want moving forward. It highlights the idea that with precision fermentation, with that side of the technology platform, you can make a wide range of proteins for a wide range of different sectors, some with different margins. So it's one of the reasons why investors, at least earlier on, and still we see today, are supporting companies in this precision fermentation space a lot more.
Yeah,
thank you very much, Ahmed. One question I will ask every one of you. Could you quickly name the 3 biggest challenges that you see in the sector? Because then we have automatically answered a lot of questions at the same time. So just name 3 big challenges that we are facing today in the sector. So,
but here you have to go a bit more into detail, I guess. Otherwise, we'll hear the same again and again, right?
Yeah,
I think
yeah. Just on a high level, three buzzwords. Who wants to start?
I mean, the first one, what we'll see a lot more moving forward is consumer and public acceptance. That's going to be one. That's one going to be one of the buzz phrases.
Okay, consumer acceptance.
I think you can probably guess what I'm going to say is you know, capacity. Yeah.
Capacity.
I would also add to that just really briefly that in addition to capacity, and here's my sort of plug for my field. So you know, in addition to the physical capacity of you know, fermenters and tanks, there's a real shortage of human capacity, i.e. Engineering and scientists, you know, expertise in science and engineering that is focused on synthetic biology and fermentation. I think there's probably less of a shortage in synthetic biology, but finding good fermentation scientists who, you know, are interested at working at large scales, interested in that process of scale up, and who can competently sort of run a fermentation. It's a real shortage of available people in that area. So there's a plug for fermentation engineering as a career field for any students out there who are listening.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Jeremy.
Jeremy, we will tackle this problem because our system can be used by a simple technician who does not need to be a biotechnologist. So we really want to go there. But I see a huge challenge also in the supply chain. Like if we want to, 2030, we don't want to have any cows producing caseins anymore, but really produce everything with bioreactors, then we really need to work on a supply chain for all the things we need to build the assets. That's not so easy right now, in particular not in the times we have. So like even buying a simple bioreactor is really difficult right now because there is not really the right supply chain for that. And also for the ingredients or for the input material later, like glucose, and also different regions needs different media, because like I had last month a discussion with people from Saudi Arabia, and they just don't have glucose and they need to work with local input, like they want to use dates. So we need to optimize also our microbes to work on whatever comes out from dates. And same for Africa, for example, they also have different requirements or different input material that can be used for precision fermentation. We're really talking about huge amounts of glucose or sugar, so that also needs to be tackled. We cannot work with chemically defined medium forever, but really need to work with complex media.
Anna, from your side?
From my side, apart from the regulations, which, you know, I really believe that we can demonstrate these products are safe. I think something that we haven't mentioned is kickback from traditional farming stakeholders. I think this could potentially be a very big issue, particularly with the sort of farming stakeholders and the powerful lobbies that they have. I think that this could be a potential barrier. So I think as an industry, we really need to set the narrative. So we really need to engage with traditional farming stakeholders. We really need to engage with consumers and not allow the people that are against this industry to set the narrative and start calling it a Frankenstein food, like we did with the whole GMO, you know, back in the 90s. So I think that's something that could be a potential challenge, but we do have an opportunity to set the narrative and you know, engage, educate people on what we're doing and why it's a good idea.
Yeah, I think this is a very, very good point, because it needs to get at some point in time, or it needs to be part of our food culture. And this is also something that we see addressed by some questions here: consumer acceptance, how we can educate about the topic, how will it get part of the normal food culture and food life. And this is, I think, one of the major issues we need to challenge here, and this is all about the narrative. I think what I liked about the current plant-based revolution, it's more about a new lifestyle. It's not about fighting for good. It's more about it's a modern lifestyle, and it's absolutely, it has some pop cultural elements, because also a lot of VIPs are investing in the sector, and I think this is absolutely important. So yeah, very, very good point. Thank you, Hannah.
And it's a mix of these things, right? So you need to, as Eva said as well, there will be artisanal cheeses, cashew based, also fermentation based, but traditional fermentation, and there will be more expensive and maybe more fast food, because someone mentioned that this is fast food if it's mozzarella, of course, but people want fast food and they want mozzarella, and you have to find solutions for that. So it will be many solutions in parallel, and that's why it needs all of those hybrid and then high quality end products as well. But Hannah, one thing that I'm also curious about, since you mentioned it, and I think it hasn't been fully answered, maybe it's not possible, is the labeling, at least in the EU. In the US, for the Brave Robot ice cream, they just say it's non-animal based whey protein. So that's easy. It sounds easy. What will it be then in the EU and elsewhere, if that's definitely possible to say?
So first of all, it is up to the applicant to propose the labeling in their novel food application. So that's the first part that we can think about as an industry. So we can think about whether or not we want to call it, non-animal derived beta-lactoglobulin, or what we actually want to call it. But there are a couple of precedents. So there's recent novel food approval for a human milk oligosaccharide that's derived from modified E. coli. And in that authorization, the labeling requirements, so you can say that it's the human milk oligosaccharide, so you can call it what it is, and there's no need to call it GMO, so there's no requirement to call it GMO. So basically, if we look at that precedent, then it looks relatively positive, but then obviously with the precision fermentation and proteins derived from precision fermentation, there is going to be more opposition about what we call these products. So I think from the EU perspective, we can always argue that we have these precedents, but again, there may be a bit of a battle ahead with the traditional farming stakeholders and the more conservative member states that want us to call, have their own agenda and want us to call these proteins derived by precision fermentation a specific thing.
So what do you think is the most likely, or what will be a standard, if any, in the future? Because if it's just so diverse and anything is possible, how would we handle this as consumers, but also as the food industry?
Yeah, I mean, the key thing about labeling is to ensure that it's clear and not misleading to the consumer. So I would say, something like non-animal derived beta-lactoglobulin or microbially derived beta-lactoglobulin. So it's very, very clear what the product is and that it's not derived from an animal.
But the question is if this is really clear for the end consumer, if you write it in this way. So this will be, I think, one of the key challenges that we are facing.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's, you just to make it easier, because I doubt, as you say, the average consumer would know what beta-lactoglobulin is. So maybe it's non-animal derived dairy proteins is what you actually call it on the label.
Yeah, absolutely. So there were some questions about the customer willingness to try this products or the price structure. I think this is always a look in the glass bowl. So
yeah, this is the same for the other technologies and categories as well, right? It just takes time, and then the how much you have to pay and if people are willing to pay for it.
I think that it's important to note that we're the sort of maybe the cost prohibitive aspect of some of these products are calculated based on current market conditions. We don't know what the future holds. We don't think that you know, animal agriculture the way it exists is viable for the long term, but you know, we don't know what the future looks like. So there may be, as you know, some think tanks out there have proposed, there may be a sort of a precipitous decline in the cost, where it's sort of like, well, if you want the cheese that your parents enjoyed, you know, the certain specialty kind of cheese, this is your option. You have, you know, you can eat it, you know, from casein made by fermentation, or you can, you know, pay for the animal version, which is now, you know, multiples of what it used to be. So I think that the landscape will change, and as it changes, you know, there will be sort of a revaluing of some of these foods. I do think that you know, there will always be room for specialty proteins as food ingredients. So thinking of in terms of like gelatin, I think Ahmed mentioned that. You know, these sort of ingredients that add texture, that add, you know, that function as emulsifiers. And I'm thinking even, you know, this is just me sort of thinking, I don't have evidence to support this, but just from being within the field, I do believe that, you know, we're going to see an emphasis on these sort of proteins with multiple functionalities. So you think about a casein that is, you know, it's designed, maybe it's altered in some way, a few amino acids here and there, that now it's a super casein. It's got like ultra stretchy properties, you know, or say it's been designed so that microbes in the gut can easily digest it and turn it into bioactive peptides in the gut that offer, you know, that confer gut health. So you know, you might start to see these sort of highly designed proteins that that offer a functionality that's not available from animal-based products, and there's a real value proposition for the customers that are open to it. You know, I mean, some customers are going to say, no, I'd rather drink milk from a cow. You know, even though we're not of the same species, I'd rather do that, or eat cheese from a different species. But others will say, you know what, it's a super casein, I'm going to try it, and you know, if the taste is there, I think it can be successful. So I think that's another value proposition for precision fermentation, sort of upgrading existing animal proteins.
Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, it's really cool to have this more holistic approach, and also not like from a fermentation scientist, from a specialist, to take these different angles and see how the market would look at it and how it would be marketable in the first place.
I think it's time to wrap it up because we are just about to have the final minute of our today's session. It was a really, really great and fruitful discussion that we had with all of you today. And I like really the spirit that was in this digital room, and I hope to see you soon offline again. I cannot really, I said it right in the beginning when we had the speaker briefing, that I'm so happy that we will see more and more summits again opening their doors, and that we will drink something, mingle, network, whatever. So yeah, looking forward to see you all in person quite soon. And yeah, as I said, it was a very, very fruitful and wonderful session that we had today. I think we will have the next session before the summer again. We will get back to you. That is not discussed with Albrecht already.
No, we'll keep you posted, of course. We'll try to make this happen before the
Yes.
summer is a bit more flexible, yes. But yes, this next edition is coming up, so stay tuned. Yeah, thanks to everyone, to our amazing panel here, but also to all the people out there joining and asking all these questions. We try to answer some of them later on. Some of you are already doing this in parallel here, so that's great. Really very interactive. I think, Fabio, this is as close or as good as it gets online. And then it's just the second best thing, but it was very interactive and very, very active actually among the panel, among the audience and the panel, and among the audience themselves itself as well. So really cool to see so much activity.
Absolutely.
Here.
So
Yeah.
stay
Thank
safe.
you very much.
Thank you very much. And yeah, looking forward to see you in our next session.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
all.
you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.